But nitrogen's a different story. Nitrogen's a very friendly chemical. There's one we can liquefy. We can buy it in the liquid state. You see all these tanks out around the farm country and there's this blue liquid in them. Well, that's just liquid nitrogen. And they call it N32. That's the popular one around here. That's just what they call it, N32, 32% nitrogen liquid. And it looks blue, and they just inject that stuff constantly on certain crops, like potatoes. There's potato farmers that will inject 2 or 3 times a week. Some guys will inject it continuously through the whole growing season. They're just metering in a little bit of nitrogen every time they water. So they're almost foliar feeding the plant. It's almost like a greenhouse effect. And nitrogen stays dissolved very nicely. Now the problem there is, yeah, it stays dissolved if we overwater. Right out the bottom of the profile goes the nitrogen with the water. So there's a chemical that we don't dare over irrigate, because it stays in suspension very nicely. We really have to be concerned about backflow prevention, because here's a case where we can have a disaster if we are injecting chemical into a system and for some reason the system shuts off, the pump shuts off, and we keep injecting chemical. If we don't have backflow prevention, odds are some of that chemical, if not all of it, is going to go backward into the well, into the pond, whatever the water supply happens to be, into the river, and all of a sudden we've just got ourselves a giant contaminated water supply. Now every now and then you will hear about a fish kill in a river where chemical was spilled, usually not through irrigation. We just had one last year here in this area. A truck got in a wreck and a big 55-gallon drum broke and spilled into a small stream here in the valley. Well, for about 5 miles it killed all the fish before it finally dissolved itself out enough so it didn't have any damage. Well, that company that got in the wreck, they were responsible, and they paid quite a healthy fine for the destruction of 5 miles of stream, effectively. And the state fined them, and then the state went in and went about the process of rehabbing the stream. And I think it was on the Touchy River, actually. It was kind of a serious deal. Well, you could think what would happen. Think what would happen if a guy accidentally got this injected down into a well and contaminated an underground aquifer. Now you got yourself a real serious mess, because how long will it take for that groundwater to clean up? It could be years. And the wrong chemical got in there, you could really have a disaster. You could contaminate miles around you in an underground aquifer that would make the water totally unfit for a long, long time to come in the future. Especially some of these areas that have what they call fossil water, where the water doesn't recharge. It's just there and you're using it up. Well, you contaminate that water, you've eliminated the water supply for the area. So they have very, very stringent controls on backflow prevention, as there should be. And I got some samples, and the first and most simplistic is just of air vacuum breaker. This is a little turf system. This would be legitimate on a turf system to keep backflow from occurring, and water would come up through this valve, across through this air brake, and then down into the system. Now if for some reason the pump shut off and water wanted to drain backwards through the system, it comes into this area, there's an air brake in here where there's a poppet that pops open and allows air to come in the system and eliminates the ability of a siphon occurring backflow. And all it is a little plunger in here that is forced up in the top of the cap. When there's pressure on the system, this little plunger is sitting here like this, and it gets pushed up. when there's water on the bottom side of it, pressing it and sealing off the air. As soon as water drops off the system, it drops down and allows air to come in the piping, and that would break any vacuum created and would break a siphon effect by allowing air into the highest point of the system. Now this must then be at the highest point in the system. So if you're pumping uphill, this will not work unless you have this at the top of the hill.
What is that called?
This is called an air vacuum breaker. Now that is not legal for controlling systems under the new plumbing codes throughout the nation. In most areas, there might be a rare place where this would be a legal anti-backflow device, but I sure would never trust it. Not if I was injecting chemical. If I was just concerned about my irrigation system, if I wasn't worried about contaminating water with any outside injected sources, then I wouldn't be so concerned about this style. It's positive enough. I mean, what kind of contaminants is going to come back from your sprinkler system in your yard if you're not injecting chemical? Well, there's not much out there that's going to be of any real problem. But if you're injecting, if you have any kind of injection system, then all of a sudden that injection system could be pressurizing from the backside and would never allow that poppet to come down. And then that's when you end up with the problem.